Hello everyone, welcome to that video I'm doing about the compressor on the Tempest. So it's only one knob, but there's a lot to say about it. And I'd like to start with a thank you to all of you guys sending messages and comments about my last video, sound design video about the Tempest. Really helps, motivates me to do more. Tempest is the center part of my drum section in most of my productions. I use it for soundtracks a lot. I use it more now with keys and pads. I feel like it adds a specific color to sounds that I don't have with other gears. The Tempest is pretty much locked now. Obviously, there's no more update, and we have to do with what we have here. It reminds me of these tools in the 90s where they were coming out of the factory and you would get this thing. And people will find tips and hacks to even push beyond what it was first designed for. We're not going to do that here with a compressor. We'll have a more traditional approach, if you will. The compressor was an element that I really always left on the side because I caved to the rumors saying that it was not that good. So I always left the compressor because also sitting right next to the distortion that I didn't like, and I still don't like it. But then SSL came up with this Bus Plus compressor, and on the specs I was pretty amazed by what it was doing. Obviously it's an iconic compressor that is used on bus compression, drum, and everything's here in that box with extra flavors of IQ, dynamic IQ, the 4K mode that you can engage to simulate different types of consoles, also with mid-side and classical compression. So I thought, this is an expensive gear, but I will send it secondhand if I don't like it, and it's going to be a 30% drop in price. It's not going to go under 50%, I guess. And that amount of money is what I would rent it to make up my mind and practice and, yeah, educate myself. If hopefully that can help you, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to test the Tempest compressor versus the SSL compressor and see how that works. So also the compressor on the Tempest is just like other elements of the Tempest. When I first started to work with this and designing my own sounds, because I didn't like the presets coming up with the Tempest, I was pushing all the settings, and that's really not what you want to do. I'm not going to explain it here. There's a video about the kicks that addresses this a little bit, but the more you lower things, the more punch you can get out of the Tempest. The less you reach just that glass ceiling where everything becomes a bit noisy, and the feedback is a good example for that. All right, feedback would add texture and beefiness to the sound, but it's gonna break everything apart behind. So I would prefer use it 0 or a little bit, but just try to find that sound and texture in other with other parameters. And this is what I should have done also with the compressor that I'd never done. So I'm now going to play some of the beats I have here, and we're gonna first listen to the Tempest as it is. Compression is 0%, we go 50%. I'm going to go for another beat, 0%. And one last beat. 100%. So that's that. The overall feeling I have is that already at 50%, there's like a bouncy effect that I might like, especially for example in that beat. Something quite groovy. something you would look if you were using parallel compression. Only the parallel compression would have the kick going dry through and would be less affected. Here, I have the feeling that the kick is getting hammered down. There's a bit of transient going through, but it doesn't help much. And then if you go at 100%, you have some noise coming in, but also there's some inconsistency in the beat. Some elements suddenly are jumping above. It's clearer with this sound here. I think like it's a reggae type of beat. Yeah. So 0%, I'm gonna go 100% just to illustrate that. So you have that hi-hat just cha-cha-boom. Now, that can be the groove you're looking for, but it's killing literally the low end and the kick. So I was never really pleased by that. And then everything before 50%, I was not sure exactly what I was doing. Obviously, having all the knobs on the SSL, you can sculpt, attack and decay. Having a visual feedback on how much you compress also just helps that. I mean, if you're starting, you can trust your ears. And I think for me, using the SSL helped me diving into precise settings, having that visual feedback and that also audio feedback helped me find what I liked in the compression, and then obviously started to compare it with the Tempest. So let's do that. First beat, raw, and I'm going to use now the SSL, trying to get the sound I like. So there are typical settings. I'm going to put slow attack, fast release, compression 10, and we're going to see how that sounds like. So now lowering the threshold. Push the makeup. Without. With. So I like that. Everything gets tighter. The bottom is still there. This is probably the typical type of compression I would look for if I would be using a plugin. I'm happy with that, and I'm going to now compare it with the Tempest compressor. Turn it on. Okay. So I can feel now there's compression, but I'm not all the way up to this bouncy element. This is the bouncy. I'm going to dial down. I'm at 30%. A bit less. So I don't have that bouncy effect anymore. Let's turn it off to see how it sounded like before. And compare it with the SSL. The Tempest. SSL. So for me, I have quite a similar feeling. It's a bit different. Is it better, worse? But it's not completely off. And I think that myself, I needed that. I needed that comparison to be able to say, right, you have one knob, but between 0 and 30%, things are happening that are enough. Again, as I was doing before with sound design and just over pushing things. Now, the more I'm using beats, the more I'm trying to just dialing the compressor, get a feeling of tightness and just leave it there before going to something a bit more bouncy and jumping all around. Let's listen to another beat at 0%. I'm going to turn on the SSL with those settings. So it's quite subtle. I like some of the precision that the SSL brings. Little details popping up that I don't exactly see in the Tempest compressor. But then again, we're getting to some quite similar type of settings. If I would push the Tempest, I would come back to that pumpy effect. I'm not a fan of, because not only it's pushing things, but then each attack on the beat where the kick hits is losing a bit of density. So dial it down to 50%, to 30%. Maybe SSL. Turn it off. Let's go for the last beat. This one at 0%. I like what it brings. When you mute it, it's really like kick and snare have less punch really. Things are getting together, so I like what it does. Let's listen to the Tempest. I'm gonna go 20%. A bit more. I'm gonna go all the way 50%. I'm not a fan of what's going on here. Scale it down. Compare with the SSL. So I messed up a bit the settings. It's not exactly the same. I might prefer the SSL, but really I think the Tempest is doing a good job. We're at 9 o'clock, so really it's not much dialed in. But it's not incoherent. The moment the snare starts to be processed is just the limit that I like. Now obviously this goes further with extreme settings, especially with the ratios. All the EQ and dynamic EQ bring a lot of option when you have something a bit muddy and you want to work things out. I'm not going to go with more beats. It takes a lot of time, I guess. But there is a very important part that I'd like to talk about, which is managing the mix level going to the compressor. Because here there's no threshold. So I was thinking, all right, let's just take that beat. And probably that's a beat you had. I didn't do this one, so somewhere it was available. Shout out to whoever did this one. What I did is that I set all the mixer at 127, and I tried to redo this mix by going to just under the filter section. You have a volume and feedback, and I trimmed this volume knob at that position to try to reproduce the mix. And then it allowed me to get another copy of that beat where all the knobs at 127, I just dropped them at 64, sending less level to the compression. And then I did the same at an extreme setting at 30. Now I'm going to turn the compression off. We're going to go through these elements, check out how the sound completely changes. So I'm going to reduce the master out, listen to the first beat. That's 127. We're going to drop to 64. You can hear the snare has changed a little bit already. Let's go back to 127. Like a longer tail. And now I'm going to go all the way down to 30. The sound is completely different. Back to 127. So that's super interesting because how does that work? The VCAs, the envelope probably have an impact on what's going on, but all the tails look a bit shorter. That's why the snare is super shorter. The kick is popping out suddenly. So it's very interesting if you have a beat you like to just make a copy of it. Try to have your mix being done not at the mixer level, but just before, and just experiment how the beat sounds. Now let's go with the compressor, because obviously if all the parameters of the mix are at 30, I'm sending way less to the compressor. So it's almost like having a threshold that I'm playing with. And listen to how the compressor reacts. So you remember that before, the compressor arriving at 50% would be already bouncy and punchy. We're going to see, I'm going to scale it up. I'm starting at 0. Going up. $50. Down and 0. For me, that was one of the best surprise, is that I would never use the compressor at 100%, but with such a low level at the mixing stage, suddenly you have the entire course of the compressor knob to get many flavor. And I cannot say that the most extreme one is a bad one. It's also, you realize that when you are at 100%, there's like the volume is compensated, where here I have to play with a makeup gain. But if I send something that is low level to the compressor, it's almost like turning on the compressor also turns on the overall gain. So something's happening there, and I think it's really worth trying, just having your mix as low as you can try. I mean, if you go below that, it's going to be almost clicky sounds and very short. I've tried like at 10. Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. So here is it at 10. So I really need to push the sound card. It's not working. I have way too many noise. Let's see what the compressor does. It's gonna give it even worse. For some reason I only hear the kick, so it doesn't work. So there is this limit. 30 for that beat works. There's something quite nice. Even if I push it like this, the kick gets some smashy effect that is funny, obviously noise. That's too much, but you get the point. 0, 50%. So that's it for that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gives you some ideas with the compressor if you left it on the side. Try this lowering mix technique. It's pretty good. very creative. And I'd like to make a little announcement too. I've been out of social medias for the last 6-7 years. If you think modular synthesizers or music takes a lot of time, try Kids, and it's a wonderful experience, but it takes a lot of time. So I'm trying to put more content. It's about my workflow, things I do for soundtracks, sound art installations, and working for bands. So there's going to be some business subject, there's going to be some template breakdown, sound design, and practice routine on your instrument, and creation, inspiration. I think that's pretty much a very important subject. Now, if you guys drop me below some comments about things you'd like to talk about, I'd like to read that and be very happy to respond. My next video on the Tempest might be about finger drumming. Somebody asked about this, and I think the Tempest is something I really liked for that. The layout of the pads, you've seen some video of me messing around, and it's really a good tool for live and a really pleasant one to play just as an instrument. Well, for the moment, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.